Hey, good evening everyone. Today's episode, I'm going to show you how to take your sun visors from looking old and dilapidated just like this to something like this. If you clicked on this video, you probably have a set of sun visors, or maybe it's another piece of fabric that is not in the best of shape. In my case, it is my sun visors on my 68 Firebird. They're just old, they've got mold and some dirt and grime, and overall they just don't look that great anymore. Now, these are also cream colored sun visors, and I'm actually switching the entire interior to black. So I ended up re-sewing all of this by hand. One of the goals of this episode is to show you that you can also do this on a budget. Everything that I'm going to use in this video cost me probably less than $50. So stay tuned and we'll get to it. So some of the things that are going to be required for this job are going to be your obvious fabric that you want to put over your sun visors, a yardstick or some type of flat tool to help you get perfect lines. Once again, not necessary if you got a good eye, but it does help with the process. You're going to need an iron. I have the mini iron for my wife's Cricut, but a normal home iron works just as well. You're going to need a pair of scissors to cut your fabric. You're going to need a set of pliers to remove some of the clips on the sun visor, kind of like this one here and this one right here, as well as pulling your needle through sometimes if it gets difficult. You're obviously going to need some thread. You're going to need a sewing needle. You're going to need a pick of some sort. Once again, not necessarily required, helps with the job. You're going to need a Sharpie to mark out your fabric. Some 3M super strength adhesive. Once again, not required. Definitely helps with whenever you go to sew everything together. It keeps it all nice and straight. And those are the tools that you need. One of the tools not in frame is going to be a sewing machine. Not required, however, that definitely will make this all go together much quicker. I'm going to be using the sewing machine for one portion of this sun visor. However, everything else is going to be done by hand to show that you don't need the sewing machine. You don't need a lot of these specialty tools. So for starters, you're going to need to take your old sun visor and you're going to remove all of these clips right here. So now that we have those clips removed, we need to go ahead and take off all of the leather surround stitching that goes around the sun visor. That's where this pick comes in handy. Keep in mind whenever you start doing this, that this fabric is old. In my case, it's from 68, so it's got some years of wear and tear on it, so I need to be extremely careful with the fabric as to not tear it. So that way when I go to put it up on the new fabric, it's not hard to get an accurate measurement. So now that we have this leather outer perimeter removed, we're going to go ahead and set that off to the side. And now we're going to move on to the main body of the sun visor. So this here is actually a stitched unit all the way around and it's gone through. So I'm going to go ahead and take my pick and just start removing some of the stitching that's in here. So now that we've got this removed from the main body of the sun visor, we're going to go ahead and set this aside. And we're going to focus our attention onto the rest of the leather and the padding. And we're just going to peel it away nice and slow, trying to keep all of this intact. So one of the next important steps is going to be taking your old sun visor fabric and you're going to lay it on top of your new fabric and mark out where you need to cut. So run a line all the way around. So now that we've traced out the old sun visor fabric onto the new one, we're just going to take our scissors and we're going to cut on the outside edge of this line. And the reason being is because this fabric is old and is probably shrunk just a little bit, as well as this sew edge right here is curled up. So whenever we flatten it out, it should be just a little bit wider, and we'll go ahead and follow that line all the way around. Now that we have our new fabric cut out, we're going to go ahead and lay it back on top of this pad right here. So take note that it is folded over right now. Here's that inseam where it runs over the top. You got your tape in here. So you're just going to fold it over. You're going to set this on top of it and then lay it out flat. When you flip it over to lay that felt down on top of your new fabric, you want to make sure that everything lines up where it should. Shimmy it around, make sure that it actually sits appropriately and where you want it. Now that it's matched up to your pre-existing lines, you just want to take some of this 3M Super Strength adhesive and you just want to spray a little bit down. And stick your felt onto it. That should tack it in place. That way you can start moving it around and getting the rest of it tacked up. Now that this is kind of tacked down and where you want it, you're going to go back through, and I made some lines here following the last piece of that fabric. And I didn't cut all the way because if there was any type of adjustment, I can go ahead and kind of fine tune that, so that way when we're done and we have the finished product, there's no cut lines showing past it. Make sure when you're happy with where everything's sitting, go back through on that glue and just try and wipe some of it away. This will help with the next steps, that way it's not sticking to anything. Now that we've got that process fairly complete, we're just going to go ahead and mock everything up real quick and make sure it's all where we like it to sit. As you're mocking everything up, you'll probably see some glue on some pieces that you don't want. It's all right, it's not the end of the world. Just get yourself some Clorox wipes and wipe it off before it completely dries. So this is the part in the video where I cheat a little bit and I'm using a sewing machine. Keep in mind, you can sew all this by hand. However, a sewing machine is going to speed up the process. If you do have a sewing machine, great. They're very easy to set up. And by easy to set up, I mean have your wife do it the first time and then you can set it up after the fact. So follow along as I just kind of get this all sewn up and I'll show you what happens afterwards. Now that we got that process done, you can take a look. I've got a sewn seam that kind of goes all the way around the sun visor panel, and you can see that it is a little bit wrinkled. That's okay, because as we flex this over the sun visor, everything is going to straighten out. So we just take care of just a couple of the strings that we have here, and we get to move on to the next piece. So obviously I just used the sewing machine to kind of finish this one piece, and you could do this by hand. It's going to take a lot longer, but in the spirit of showing that you don't need any type of special tools or anything like that, I'm going to go ahead and hand sew the rest of it. So you're going to take your piece and you're going to just roughly get it to about the position that it would be in when it's all said and done. And then you're going to wrap it over. And you're just going to verify that all the fitment is correct on it. And as you set it in, it should lay out pretty nicely. And what you'll do to start is make sure that it's even on both sides, and you are going to prepare your sewing needle and your thread. Now what I like to do for sewing jobs that are going to take a little bit more strength is I'm going to take my thread, I'm going to double it up, and at one end I'm going to go ahead and tie it off. Now that it's tied off on one end, I'm going to take the other end and keep it taut and grab the very tip of it. I'm just going to feed it through the needle. Now that it's fed through the needle, I'm just going to go ahead and tie it off twice because your thread will probably come undone, but as long as you can make sure that it stays tight, you shouldn't have any issues. So when you start to sew this together, my best piece of advice is to grab one end of it and start your stitch on the back side of it. And since you tied it off, it's going to lock in place. Now that it's on the back side, you're going to tuck the strings up. You're going to go over, and this is going to be a very simple stitch. You're just going to go into one side, out the other, into that other side, and then back through. And now with this first stitch done, you're going to pull it tight, make sure that your ends still meet up properly here. You're going to make sure that everything is dead even, and then you're going to feed another one right back through the other side. I recommend doing these stitches as low as possible, so that way whenever you make your leather trim panel, it's going to cover up a lot of these stitches right here. Now that we got a couple of these in place, just verifying that both of these ends are still super close together. So we'll get the rest of this sewn up, and I'll see you then. So now that we're at the end of our stitching, to finish it off, we're going to do a couple loop stitches, and we're just going to push it through. We're going to come out the other side, and then we're just going to feed it through. When you come through, cinch it down at the bottom. You're just going to loop it through here. Hold your finger on the end of it and tie it off. Now that it's tied off, go ahead and clip any excess. And now you should have a completely sewn piece that goes all the way around. Your edge should be pulled together, and it should be even all the way around as well. Most people would actually stop right here and just leave it as is, especially if you're doing things on a budget. You don't necessarily care about the aesthetics of the car, but still want something complete. We're going to take it a step further, and we're going to go ahead and do a leather trim that goes all the way around to sort of match this one. Once again, it's not perfect. This is a DIY job, but for DIY and under 50 bucks, you can't beat it. Now the process for doing this leather trim piece can be a little bit daunting because it requires you to measure out the leather trim itself, and then you're gonna have to flip it over, fold it, and then iron it. That's where that iron comes into play. And then when you iron it, you'll have really, really nice folded edges on the end, and then you'll pinch it over the bottom and sew that through. Now, the way to do it is to have your fabric ready, and you're gonna take the old trim and you're going to unfold it all the way, and you are gonna measure this portion right here. When you measure it, you're gonna get your reading, and in my case, it's gonna be 1.25 inches. Luckily for me, this straight edge is just about 1.25 inches, and so when I mark my line out on the outside, I'm just gonna use this to create my straight piece, and then I'm gonna cut on the outside of the line to give myself a little bit of space. Now to get the length of the piece that you need, this old trim is gonna be really, really stiff, and since it's been curled up for decades, it's gonna be a little bit tough to stretch it out. You're gonna get your mark. I went ahead and already marked it out, so in my case, we are 1.25 inches wide, and we are 26.5 inches long. That strip, as you can see, is gonna be this piece right here. And so when we go ahead and cut everything out, and then I'll show you the next step. So now comes the fun part of taking your edges, folding them over, and ironing them. You can do this by hand. Like I said, you don't need any special tools to do it. Just make sure that you get your measurements right. And what you're gonna do is you're just gonna fold one side, and go ahead and just iron these pieces. I'm lucky enough to have these tools here where you can just feed it in, and as you feed it in, it's going to wrap the edges around itself. So as you can see here inside of the tool, it's gone ahead and folded it over. While I'm waiting for the iron to heat up, keep in mind that your iron can get extremely hot, and depending on what material you're working with, this plasticky material, if you get your iron too hot, it will melt this material and can give you this nasty edge on the outside. So just keep in mind how hot you've got your iron, and as you press things down. I like to leave it on there just a little bit longer so that way it does melt some of the material and keeps a really, really stiff, sharp edge. You're gonna need the measurement for when your material is folded over. And in my case, it's 3/4 of an inch. This little tool right here folds it almost perfectly to 3/4 of an inch. When I press down with the iron, it comes exactly to 3/4 of an inch and gives me a nice crease. So now that this iron is heated all the way up, we're just gonna go ahead and take the edge and we're just gonna stamp a couple of times. So you can see already that some of that material is already melted, but it has created a very, very nice edge for me. When you look at this side, it still looks perfect, and we're gonna fold this over and get our seam sewn in. So now that we've ironed everything, you can see that we've got our edge on this side, and on this side we've got the fabric that's going to be showing on the sun visor. I'm going to go ahead and measure everything using that 25-inch mark. You can see that there's 25 here and the 3/4 of an inch mark right here. And when we set it up there, we are just shy of 3/4 of an inch, which is okay because it was stretched the fabric over. That should get us right to that 3/4 of an inch mark. So now that we've verified our measurements, I'm just going to take it back over to the sun visor that we just stitched up. We're just going to match everything up to make sure that what we measured is the true length. You should probably do this step beforehand, but I knew that the measurements are going to be good. So it comes all the way to the edge here, it comes all the way to the edge here. Whenever we go ahead and start sewing everything, this is going to be stretched out just a little bit, so you actually might have some wiggle room to get over the edge. If there's any part of this entire process that's the most time consuming, it's going to be this, because you have to make it through a couple different materials. You're going to go through the foam here, the 2 pieces of fabric, and then this outside leather trim piece, which is also going to have to be sewn. Get yourself a stiff needle, and you're going to go ahead and double up your thread just like we did for the first set, and you're just going to start working it through. So the same thing applies whenever you're starting out on this one as well. You're going to go ahead on the back edge of your leather trim. You're going to feed it through so that when you pull it through, your knot edge is on the back side. It's not going to be seen. And I like to start at the front of the sun visor, at least on my application, because I know that on this back side right here, there's going to be a metal trim piece that sits over it. So if there's an edge that doesn't look totally right, I can go ahead and cover it up. Now that we're on the last stitch, we're going to go ahead and feed it through. Same thing as before. We're going to cinch it off. And then you should be all done. Like I said, it's not perfect, but for cheap, it'll do. Now for some added flair, take all the metal pieces that you took off originally, try and use a brass wire wheel on a Dremel, or if you have any type of brass brush, they can be picked up pretty cheap at Harbor Freight. And then what you'll do is just clean everything off really nice. Now you've got some shinier metal pieces to throw on there. So we'll go ahead and start with the front one. Front one's clamped on. Now we'll take the back. And that little piece that I was concerned with, I'm gonna go ahead and cover it up. I'm just going to clamp down. Now that it's clamped down, it's gonna hold that piece really, really well in there. And then as our final piece, first reinsert the collar. And now you're done. Now you've got two brand new reupholstered sun visors. Remember that this style of upholstery can apply to a lot of different things. In my particular case, it just happened to be sun visors, but not too bad for 50 bucks. So here's a little bit of a price breakdown. You've got a set of pliers. The pliers can be picked up for as little as what can be seen up here on screen. With a screwdriver, once again, not necessary, but definitely helpful. Everyone should have a screwdriver. A pair of scissors you probably already have in your home. A sewing kit can be bought for probably $10-ish on Amazon. Same thing with a lot of the other tools like a Sharpie, or biggest thing is going to be the fabric. You can use many types of different fabrics. Mine specifically ended up coming in the headliner kit that I bought for my car. And once again, it can be picked up super cheap on Amazon, and I should have a total up on screen here now. And that should be a rough estimate about what you'll spend to reupholster your sun visors or another piece of fabric. Obviously the price goes up with the larger piece that you're going to reupholster, but for this right here, I'm going to estimate about 50 bucks, and then it's going to go up gradually as you start to add more materials. Keep in mind that pre-assembled brand new sun visors from Classic Industries are about $126 before tax and shipping and everything like that. And not to mention they are made to order, so it's going to be 3 to 4 week lead time for those. Whereas most of the stuff that you buy on Amazon can get to your house within 1 to 3 days. So not too bad. And for each one of these sun visors, I have about 2 to 2.5 hours into each one of them. And that's including all the time that it takes to set up the camera and everything like that and talk you through it. Guess that about 2 hours for each one of these is going to be your rough ballpark for how long it's going to take. So wait 3 days for all your Amazon materials to get here, and then about another 4 hours of actual work to do. To me, saving the $70 to $100 means something to me anyway, because, well, like I said, this isn't a perfect car. Call it me being lazy or me trying to justify cutting corners. However, for someone like me who's not looking for a show spec car and I just want something that looks good from 20 feet, this is definitely the way to go. So here you have it. This is going to be the driver's side here. So all said and done, this is the part that everyone's going to see as it's flipped up. The passenger side right here. So not too bad for $50 when it's all said and done. Whenever we go to do the interior, you'll see these installed. Hopefully in a future episode, you'll see me dyeing the door cards. I've already got one complete, so one of the videos that I'll put out is going to be a tutorial on how to dye the leather. Once again, it's cream interior, and we're going with all black. So stay tuned for that. And additionally, I will go put the video out for welding in the rocker panels. So I'll see you next time.